Good day. This is Teresa Fredericks from Growing Businesses Using Projects, bringing you yet another video, this time on the implementation of the Procurement Act of Trinidad and Tobago, unsettled issues. It's video 7 in the series, and we are dealing with compliance requirements, and this is part 3. Our topic is civil society and individuals who receive public money ready for the implementation of the Act. Our agenda: we're going to look at public procurement, strategic level and operational level, organizational management of procurement, general guidelines for achieving the objects of the Act, procurement depository, special guidelines for NGOs, public procurement, retention and disposal of public property handbook, and issues to be resolved. So in public procurement, we note that to achieve the objects of the Act, each public body is required to perform public functions at 2 levels, the strategic level and the operational level. So at the strategic level, there are activities at this level set the overall direction for procurement activities at the operational level in alignment with the strategies outlined in the public body's strategic objectives and reflected in the results chain for procurement, retention and disposal of public property. This results chain is the overall procurement strategy, and it sets the strategic direction of the function based on the public body existing strategic plan. The results chain provides the expected outcome areas for procurement, retention and disposal of public property. Key documents produced at this level include the results chain, which is the overall procurement strategy, the annual procurement plan, the annual schedule of procurement activities, and the annual procurement performance report. So let's look at organizational management of procurement. And we see here 5 key areas: procurement and disposal planning, system of internal control, category management, performance management and measurement, and reporting. This video is not going to get into these areas. Organizational management of procurement is about identifying a procurement portfolio, including the nature and relative value of categories of goods and services being procured, and the risk attaching to each category in respect of the organizational need, the relevant market, as well as in the stakeholder needs and issues, the alignment of objectives, strategies, organizations, systems, policies and procedures, and capabilities to manage risk and opportunities inherent in the procurement portfolio. So let's look at some general guidelines for achieving the objects of the Act. And the first one, you have supplier performance and relationship management, inclusive of a code of conduct for suppliers. This is something the public body has to do. The second one, you have management of personnel, ethics, compliance, etc., inclusive of code of conduct for the function and needs assessment, training and job description. Retention of public property and its related systems. All of these have to be done in order to achieve compliance with the objects of the Act. Disposal of public property and related systems. Remember, the public body is now in charge of the whole procurement cycle, so it has to do procurement, retention and disposal. It has to put in place procedures, etc., to ensure that the procurement and disposal cycle is conducted in keeping with the requirements of the Procurement Act, inclusive of setting performance measures, which are KPIs, so that as it does procurement, retention and disposal, it has to put in place the necessary systems and ensure that the systems in place, if followed properly and guided by its policies and procedures, that this will bring about compliance with the objects of the Act in the conduct of the function. Supplier due diligence and assessment of requests for pre-qualification of suppliers, contractors. Now this is a very big area, in that before you get into contract with a supplier, you have to do a due diligence on them. Sometimes even an assessment of requests for pre-qualification of suppliers and contractors. And not only is this done before a contract is made with them or before they are pre-qualified, but as the contract proceeds, the public body is supposed to be checking on the suppliers to ensure that they remain suppliers and contractors that should be doing business with the organization. So that if, for instance, something has happened and they got into a corrupt activity, etc., then that should be brought to the attention of the OPR. And the last area is pre-selection and pre-qualification relative to procurement depository, inclusive of reporting requirements. So let's look at the operational level. This is conducted for the acquisition of each item or spend category identified in the public body's procurement plan. So we were looking at the organizational level. Now we are looking at the conduct of the individual procurements. Planning for individual procurements is informed by market research and analysis. In terms of that, you have to do market research, determine whether they are suppliers, determine whether the suppliers are of the caliber that you want in terms of the quality, the technical competence, etc. In this area, you might just source suppliers from the depository of the OPR. And at this stage, the public body clearly and effectively articulates the desired supply requirements and associated outcomes, as well as identify the most appropriate way to approach the market to achieve the best results. So at the operational level, they have to determine what are the requirements for each procurement, what outcomes are they expected from each procurement, and how best to approach the market. All right? Now, if you want to learn more about requirements and associated outcomes, you can check one of my earlier videos, especially the one on what is a project. Any on the project management area would help you. So this is the procurement cycle. This is what is being done at the operational level. And in a previous video in this series, I went through this cycle. As a matter of fact, I think it spanned 2 videos, so that you can go back to it and get more information. But in this area, you are implementing the procurement and contract management strategies, because there are a lot of expectations out of that work, especially with respect to helping the supplier to be the best supplier that he or she can be. So let's look at the procurement depository. A supplier or contractor may be pre-qualified by a procuring entity for the line or lines of business and value category of goods, works or services that the procuring entity may procure, where the supplier or contractor has registered in the procurement depository and submitted a request for pre-qualification. The procuring entity has issued an invitation to pre-qualify for specified procurement proceedings pursuant to sub-regulations for, and the supplier contractor has made a submission to the procurement depository in response to this invitation. We will now look at special guidelines for NGOs. This special guideline was framed to enable pursuit of the objects of the Act, where procurement is undertaken by NGOs using public money entrusted to the care of the accounting officer of the public body by the Parliament. An NGO may be in receipt of such funds in the form of a subvention or grant from the public body. The named procurement officer shall nominate a senior procurement officer who is the contact person in the procurement public body for all NGOs that may be seeking guidance concerning their obligations under the Act. What this basically is saying is that the NGOs are operating on behalf of a ministry, and the named procurement officer in that ministry can facilitate through a senior procurement officer any guidance they may need concerning their obligations under the Act. Where the NGO undertakes procurement using public funds, there are a number of risks to be managed, and these systems should be put in place by the NGO to deal with these risks. Compliance related risks. Risks that the NGO may not demonstrate that their procurement is undertaken in a manner consistent with the objects of the Act. Risks associated with the nature of the NGO, which may be incorporated or unincorporated, vary in their management capacity, and be lacking basic systems of internal control and or formal oversight mechanisms. This is an area they have to pay attention to. And risk in transactional procurement management. Risk concerning the management by the NGO of procurement transactions in high value, high risk categories as set out in the annual procurement plan of the named ministry. One of the areas all persons have to pay attention to is the handbook. This is guided by the Office of Procurement Regulation General Guidelines, preparation of special handbooks for approval and guidelines for approval. Key requirement is that a public body should develop its own special guidelines to facilitate the achievements of the objects of the Act without compromising its unique circumstances. There's 3 options for preparing handbooks and guidelines. They may adapt the ones published by the OPR as they are, with no changes to any documents except the public body branding. They may include their special procurement circumstances as appendix to the OPR's documents if there will be a few changes, or they may rewrite their handbook and guidelines using the OPRs as template to include all their special circumstances, so that if their circumstances differ from that of the OPR, they can do these handbooks. So what are some issues to be resolved? There's need for an organizational structure for organizations that are not involved in high value, high risk procurements. The organizational structure prepared by the OPR covers these types of procurements, but many persons do not do these kind of procurements, but they still have to do a structure. There's need for clear guidelines as to how organizations mentioned above are to ensure compliance with the objects of the Act. For instance, there also has to be NGO guidelines. We need guidelines for the compilation of the public procurement retention and public disposal of public property handbook. It's said that if we differ, we can do the handbook, but there are no guidelines as to how the handbook should be done, whether it's a table or appendix or a sample. We need to determine the roles of the ministries vis-a-vis agencies. We need to determine clear guidance for procurements of the various items. The guidelines are sometimes hedged to a high-performing organization, but these small organizations, what systems they have to put in place to ensure compliance with the objects of the Act? We need to determine the role of local government, and we deal with that in another video. And we need to also look at challenge procedures, witness protection, and these other issues which will be dealt with later on. If you like my content, give us a thumbs up and please subscribe.